a good summer. It's getting close to the end. We're going to kind of continue our last couple of months of high availability stuff today. So before we get started, I do have one thing to mention again is Edge, IBM Edge for 2016 is next month. It's September 19th through the 22nd. It's at the MGM Grand in Las Vegas. So as you know, we typically have these things in Las Vegas every year. A little bit different this year, kind of moving into a little bit different cycle on Edge. And so instead of the fall, October, they moved it into September. I'm not sure why, but that's what they did. If you go to the Edge site, it says 32 days, 1 hour, 56 minutes, and 37 seconds until it starts. So if this is, you know, I kind of push Edge. Used to be IBM PowerTech U, and then we combined it over the years. It's kind of changed a little bit, but it's still the same fantastic sessions. Some of the best education, I think, that IBM offers for getting used to IBM products and different features and stuff that you can do with the Power Systems with AIX and everything that surrounds it. So if you have any chance, I think Edge is a great thing to get to, so I really promote that. So with that, let's get into what we're having today. You know, a couple of months ago, we had a little commercial at the beginning of our session, and we had Bob Foster on, and he did a kind of a little commercial on Simplified Remote Restart and what a benefit it is. So today, Bob's on for the entire session, and Bob's going to talk about Simplified Remote Restart in detail and tell you, one, how good it can be, and two, how you can get it set up. So Bob is from Lab Services, and he does a lot with this tool. He does a lot with a lot of other tools before we've had Bob on. So let's go ahead and give it over to you, Bob. And you are already the presenter, and your stuff is up. So take it away.
Hey, Joe. Thanks very much. And hey, thanks everybody attending the dog days of summer here. Yes, my name is Bob Foster. I work in Lab Services at IBM in Austin, Texas. I have been in Lab Services 8 years, but I was the agency architect for Power 4, Power 5, Power 6, and Power 7. So I started over in as agency development in architecture, and now over here in Lab Services. And today we're going to talk about Simplified Remote Restart. And if you have any questions, my email's on this first page, and reach out to us, you know, if you have stuff after the session or whatever. Oops, okay, this is the agenda today. We're going to talk about what SRR is and why I think you should adopt SRR in your environment, and then how you would use SRR just without any sort of automation tools, and then how you could use SRR with the tool that me and a couple other people have developed. And we've seen the LPM automation tool before, and it's actually now one tool that does both LPM and Simplified Remote Restart. So, but that's toward the end. So I'm going to, the first 45 minutes, you're going to get a fire hose on SRR, and let's get started here. Now, Joe did mention I had a 5-minute commercial about a month and a half ago, maybe, or close to 2 months ago on SRR. And not all of you may be on there, but at that time. But I want to go back through this again because SRR is really such an important feature. I want everybody on this phone call to agree to that by the end. So those of you who already know and love it or know you want to do it, bear with me. Let me get the rest of the people on the same bandwagon as we already are on. So I used to say this was the best feature you never heard about, and this is true. I've been talking to customers and IBMers for over a year now on SRR, and in fact we've had some enhancements done to the SRR functionality based on some feedback I was getting from customers, because I was out talking to customers all the time, and development, you know, has to spend a lot of time writing code, and so I was able to feedback to them quite a bit of stuff. So but really, SRR is just extremely crucial for us. We had live partition mobility that came out in 2008, and this has been a differentiator for our Power Platform, for our customers, and it's made it, I think it's been crucial to keep us very relevant in this marketplace with, you know, the other operating systems that are around. SRR is just along those same lines. I think Simplified Remote Restart is going to make us look great in our IT environment and keep us relevant going forward. So what is SRR? So, if you have an unplanned outage, which is what IBM calls a crash, your server's gone down. You may have 50 partitions on it. I have customers that have 200 partitions on a server, and all of a sudden those partitions are not able to be used, and you have to get the IBM CE to get out there to fix it. Well, so you got 200 partitions that are down, and now you're waiting for this IBM CE to come back. Well, with SRR, you can have a complete crash, and I'll be a little, exaggeration here. You could have that server be thrown out the window, fall to the street, burst into flames. You have cables dangling out of your IT center down to the, been ripped out from that server, and you can still restart those partitions on that server that's burning in the middle of the street to another server. So this is, incredible, functionality, I believe, for our customers, and gives you, some resiliency, if you had outages. So you don't have to, you do this yourself from your HMC. You don't have to call IBM and say, hey, I got a burning server out in the street, get someone over here, help me get everything back up and running. You can get everything back up and running. The IBM CE comes in, you fix the server, and then you can move your workload back. So SRR gives you the ability to do this, and SRR is very quick. You're not, you're just basically building new partitions on another server and DLPARing in the virtual I/O client adapters to your VLS server, almost like an LPM without the, with the server, with the LPAR being down, and the actual VLSs and the hypervisor and all that on the source server being down. So you just get your stuff back up and running. You can get the partitions back up and running very quickly. Of course, you have to restart jobs and all that kind of stuff. But from the AIX admin point, you can get those partitions back up and running on another server in minutes. So, and of course, this is the Simplified Remote Restart feature I'm talking about. You have to have Power VM Enterprise Edition, and that's what you have when you want to do live partition mobility. You have to have Power VM Enterprise Edition. SRR uses a lot of the same technology and code, so it has, it's also part of the, you need the Enterprise Edition. You can restart, at the high level, you can restart an LPAR or a partition on another server in your data center if that first server crashes, or if you have cross-site LPM, and I do have customers that do LPM across geographical areas in LPM, you can restart that LPAR in a different site. And you can do that even if your first data center is completely offline. And so it's very powerful to do this. And how hard is it to implement? And I say you just basically have to click a box on the HMC and it's implemented. So it's you don't have to do any extra work. You just have to check this box. But if you haven't checked this box yet, then there's some more problems. We're going to talk about that later. Or there's more. Oh, let's not say problems. There's more. It takes a little bit of jiggling to get this thing turned on. Okay. So this is the official definition of Simplified Remote Restart, and the very first thing that says high availability option for partitions. Well, it's not Power HA, and I actually say that in here. It's not a replacement for Power HA, and using this term high availability is probably not the right phrase to use, but that is the phrase they use in the marketing literature. But basically what it does is the HMC will save all the partition information actually on the HMC itself, and it can, when a server crashes and the hypervisor's down, the VLS is down, it has a cache copy of all the configuration data, and it can allow the HMC can then use this configuration data to rebuild these partitions on other servers and do all the VLS mappings it needs to do. It says you can prevents configuration loss and saves time and effort in recreating partitions. We already talked about some of those features there. It reduces the downtime for workloads. So basically, like I said, if that server crashes, you don't have to wait for the CE to fix it. You can SRR your partition somewhere else, and then once the CE fixes the box, you can LPM them back. And when did Simplified Remote Restart come out? Well, it's actually been out quite a while. It's been out since HMC 8.8.2 and firmware 8.20. So 8.20 firmware was when we came out with the 8.70s and 8.80s, and that's when this feature was shipped. We have the 824s and other lower end and 850s have now have the SRR features in them. If you had an 810, 824, that means you bought your 824 2 years ago, and you've never upgraded the firmware, you're not going to have SRR capability until you upgrade your firmware on one of those 824s and get it to like an 830 or 840 level of code. So, but most customers I speak to have got their firmware up above 820 and above, so they have the ability to use this. And of course, if your firmware is at 820 or HMC, it has to be at 820 or higher. So most Power 8 customers already satisfy that requirement. And one of these things about Simplified Remote Restart is they mentioned here, the second to last bullet, that you don't have this reserved storage device for each partition. So I have a couple of charts in here. This is not our first time at the rodeo with Remote Restart. We've had Remote Restart on and off over the last 4 or 5 years, and it was basically not simple, and it wasn't implemented very much. And so we decided to simplify that, and that's why they actually called this Simplified Remote Restart. So it really is, you don't have, like I said, you just click a box and your partition's remote restartable. It's not all this other stuff we used to have to do in the past. So it's extremely easy to enable this. So this is something that I'm going to drag you through for a couple of minutes because I want you to understand, you know, where this could really come in for you. This is something I think I should talk to you guys about before. But let's pretend that we've had an unplanned outage, so the server's crashed, and you have SRR enabled. So so what's going on here? The admin calls the boss and says, "Hey, boss, we lost a P8 frame because the admins normally get the alerts before the bosses do. It's crashed, and I've called IBM and they're on their way." So the boss goes, "Great. What applications are affected, and how long does IBM take that's going to be down?" When the admin comes back and says, "I've already restarted our most critical partitions, and now I'm restarting the lower priority partitions, so we should be able to get these applications back up, pretty quickly." When the boss goes, "Remote restart, I thought we could only LPM when the server was up." And the admin comes, "Yeah, this SRR is like LPM, but when the server's crashed." And the boss goes, "Oh, okay, well, great. Well, once the IBM fixes the server, call me and we'll start to LPM those partitions back to the failed server." And so the admin goes, "No problem." And so I down here at the bottom, I say, this would, no one likes to have an unplanned outage, but at least if we had an unplanned outage, don't we wish it would be this easy to get things back up and going from our standpoint as admins. So I think this is a great story why you would want to have SRR. But if we looked at this same phone call and you don't have SRR, and I know people, they've had, a lot of our customers have had our power servers for a long time and they've had crashes and they've had to go through this scenario, but we've lost a frame and it's crashed and we've called IBM and it's on their way, the same start of the conversation. But now when they ask about what applications are affected, well, in this case, the admin has to say, "Well, we lost some important applications I've made up, like social media or we have a phone launch coming up and our developers can't get on to do anything. And, the repair time is TDB. So, now we're in a conference call with a whole bunch of people on it, asking for status every 5 minutes. And then, of course, the boss gets pretty upset, says, starts to say, "We can't do this, we can't do that, and we really need the system back up and running." So they go through this throughout the day, and they find that the server back up and running. And then a few days later, we have a post-crit phone call with IBMers, and tends to get pretty high attention in a customer, and we'll have maybe a VP on there or a director. And now we start to go through, well, IBM says we've done analysis of the failure, and understand its nature, and it's not going to happen again. And so this is, I've been on lots of phone calls and tend to say this a lot, and most of the time it's always true, I'm sure. But the customer VP or director goes, I trust you, IBM, but how can I avoid this in the future? What's the way to mitigate it? Well, the IBM comes back and says, well, if you had enabled SRR, you just could have moved those workloads back to other servers, and you wouldn't have had to wait for us to fix this. And the customer VP says, I don't know what SRR is, and IBM starts to say, well, you've had this, on your boxes since day one. If you had that 820 firmware, and then of course the VP starts to get maybe a little hot under the collar. He or she says, hey, how come I didn't know about this? I want to do it now. And of course, at this point in time, up until this new 850 HMC that came out in May, you basically had to shut down that partition and enable SRR and then bring it back up. And the boss doesn't want to shut down partitions that just crashed a couple of days ago or a couple of weeks ago. So, it's not a very pleasant situation here on both IBM side and our admin side, because we didn't implement a feature that we should have done that would have saved them a lot of time. So, no one wants to have this phone call here. I sure don't want to be on this phone call. That's not a phone call to be on. So SRR can help us avoid these types of phone calls. Okay. Now this next slide, I've been talking to customers about this on and off for like a year, I said. And, I've sort of gotten a little bit of, I've got some feedback from them, and I didn't consider it. So I put this chart together because I'm trying to address the common things I've heard from customers about why they don't think SRR is important to them. And so I want to go through this with you guys and gals. This is one of the first things is all my production LPARs are clustered, so failover will occur, and if we have an outage, I'm prepared for an outage. I've designed my systems great. Thank you very much. I don't need any more help. Well, and I said, well, I guess you're right. Your production servers clusters are protected. And I talked to a customer, and I was going through this. Said, well, hey, Bob, what happened? Yeah, we have clusters, but you know what? One of our app developers hard-coded some stuff, and we hadn't tested it, and we had a crash, and the failover didn't work, and we basically had to wait for that CE to fix that server to get that app back up and running. We just could not get this back up and running on that standby cluster because of this hard-coding stuff. So, we're still going to enable on HA clusters because we don't get a chance to test our clusters all the time, and someone could change something between one test cycle and next test cycle, and then we don't look good if we did have a crash. So maybe don't worry about too much on Power HA clusters. I still go ahead and turn it on. It doesn't cost you anything to turn it on, and it gives you the flexibility if you really need it to move that cluster over to another server. So I don't know. That's probably the one thing I would say. You could maybe beat me down on that and not enable it for Power HA, but you test it every week or every month or every quarter. But the next one is my non-prod workload can be down during an unplanned outage, and you know what? I go to a lot of customers, and I'm hearing them. I say, how come your firmware isn't updated on this dev system or this test system? Well, we can't get an outage on a dev system or a test system to upgrade it because really our non-prod is our new prod. We have so many developers and apps going on, and application developers and new launches coming out. We actually use those servers sometimes more than our production servers in LPARs because we have people worldwide testing and developing code all the time on these servers. And so it is sort of interesting to me when I go to a customer and say, well, we haven't updated our non-prod servers. Some customers, segregate workload prod on one server, non-prod on another server, but they're both still down level because they can't get outages on either prod or non-prod. So I sort of think you want to enable it just, for your non-prod, just because you rarely cluster non-prod, and development tests aren't normally clustered. And if you lose those, you got app developers and people sitting around twiddling their thumbs until they bring that server back up. So, and then this third one is sort of interesting. I've heard this from a couple of customers too, and I'm a little, I believe them, but at the same time I sort of think that if a crisis occurred, amazing things could happen. But they say, I don't have enough spare resources to SRR a failed server. Well, yeah, you may not have enough free room on your other servers to get all your partitions back up and running on another server while the first server is being repaired. But I got to believe if you had a really important LPAR on the server that crashed, and it's more important than 80% of your other LPARs on other servers, that you're probably going to shut down some of those other LPARs on those other servers, and SRR is this important LPAR. So I'm not a fan of this argument, but I think you want to have that flexibility. Yeah, maybe you would never do it, but I think you want to have that flexibility that because there's definitely some LPARs are more important than other LPARs, and the server crashes that has one of those important LPARs on it. Your team, your bosses will want us to try to get that restarted no matter what if they have to bring down other LPARs. So, I'm interested in getting some feedback from you all on this, either via email or later in the call when we open it up for questions. But Please, if you stay on to the end, let me know what you think about why you don't think you would want SRR in your environment. Okay, so this next chart has a couple of the details of how we did this, how we do this now. So you can have remote HMCs with the new 850 HMC code. Now, I have some details on what's released in the new 850 HMC code as related to Simplified Remote Restart. But basically, in the upper part, this person sitting at a computer screen, they're sitting at HMCs, and there's two different HMCs, and there's two different servers down the middle, and below those black boxes are, our firmware stack and our L parts and stuff like that. So basically, these blue circles at the top is that if you go into an HMC and you look in the /data subdirectory of the HMC, you're going to start to see files that are in there. And these are the configuration files of the partitions on servers. And so this is the files that the HMC will use. If they lose a server on the left, they read this blue file up on the top left of the HMC, and then they can recreate that partition on another server on the right on another HMC, so they can simplify remote restart that. So this was this is what simplified is. It's basically don't store that blue dot somewhere in the VLS, because if the VLS crashes, you can't get to the VLS. It is store that blue dot up on the HMC, and then the HMC can have the configuration that it wants to. In this particular case, you see that there's two HMCs, and both HMCs are connected to both servers. So both HMCs have both servers blue dots, so you can lose either server below, and either HMC can help restart it. So this is the case where if you had a data center on the left, and it went down, but it had been attached to an HMC in your data center somewhere else on the right. The data center on the right, HMC, is still up and running. It has the blue dot. It has the configuration data. It can restart your L part in a different data center because it's already got the configuration data in it. So, so that's another way to look at this chart. You could have data center on the left, data center on the right, and get things up and running on the right if your first data center goes completely dark on the left. Okay. So that's how they do it. They keep the config data on the HMCs. And HMCs, you can have redundant HMCs attached to the server, and both HMCs have the config file. So you go, okay, great. Well, let me go see what I have on my servers. Do I have the Power VM Enterprise Edition? Do I have the right firmware level? Well, on the HMC, this is the age-old capabilities of a server property file. And in here, I've actually pointed out, like I said, we've been doing remote restart on and off for a few years. And so if you look at the capabilities file, you'll see there's actually 3 different capabilities that have remote restart in them. Okay? And so the one that we care about, the one I'm talking about today, is this bottom one, and it's for Power 8 servers only. They have 2 other ones. The one in the middle was something that came out with Power 7 that had a pretty complicated configuration to make it work, and was implemented definitely by a handful of customers, but I've asked a bunch of customers. I've only heard of 3 maybe, and I've been asking for a year now. So I don't think it's, I know it's definitely not adopted very much. And then the one is something that we came out with that we actually never really released, but we had it in the capabilities. So make sure you have this bottom one set to true on your server if you want to do SRR. Okay, let's talk about enabling it. So we're going to have some more charts on this and stuff like that. So at first, when you create a partition, you can enable it through the classic GUI. So, on the HMC, you have, when you log in, you can choose I want to be in the classic mode or the enhanced mode or in the last mode I logged into. So, and so there's different capabilities and different GUIs. And the rule of thumb right now is most new features will be put into the enhanced GUI. New features may or may not be added to the classic GUI. So it sort of depends on how important they think it is, whether they want to put it into the classic or not. But enhanced GUI is the superset now of any new features. But actually in the classic GUI, they do have a checkbox on the first panel to create a partition wizard that says enable Simplified Remote Restart. I got a picture of that later on. Or if you use the enhanced GUI, we now have partition templates that have SRR enabled, and you can also in the enhanced GUI you can capture SSR partitions and create new templates that will have that SRR enabled on it. So this is that partition creation time. Now when a partition is powered off, so let me talk about this. Right now this setting isn't really dynamic the way we think it's dynamic, but there is a sort of a way to do it dynamically. But right now, for anybody that doesn't have 850 HMC, the only other way to enable it is they have to power off the partition. And on the enhanced GUI, you can go off, well, and of course I said you have to have, if you had 884 HMC or lower, you basically have to use a command line to do it. If you have the 850 HMC, you can power it off and use the enhanced GUI on the 850 HMC to check a box. But if you're on any HMC other than the 850, you'll have to power off the partition, then issue this command line here below to enable it. Okay. Now, what's also new in 850 HMC is that you can actually move an LPAR between a P7 and a P8 or P8 to P8, but you have to have at least one of those two pieces of P8. And you can say, enable remote restart during the LPM move. So let's say you're on a P8. So let's say you've built out some P8 LPARs already. You say, I want to enable this, but I don't have the ability to power off this server because I'd have to get a change window, blah, 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 and to shut down all the partitions. You could actually enable it by doing an LPM of that partition to another server with this require RR set to 2, and then it will enable SRR, and then you can move it back to the original server it was on, and you don't even have to specify require RR after that. It stays on if it's on, but if it's off, you can turn it on. So you can do that during LPM right now. So this is sort of a dynamic feature, and I think the HMC team and the hypervisor team are looking to try to make it a true dynamic where you just check the box on and off, but that is not available yet. So the only way to do it, pseudo dynamically is via an LPM operation. But it could be between a P8 and a P7 or P8 and P8. So if you're trying to move from P7 to P8, you're migrating all your LPARs from P7 to P8. Set RR, require RR space 2 there, and then when you LPM it from your P7 to P8, your SRR will be enabled. And another way to do it is we're going to talk later on today about this automation tool that me and a couple of people have developed here that's used by over 160 customers worldwide. And I'm going to give you the ability to have it turned on automatically when you move from P7s to P8s or P8s to P8s, and it'll be a custom user control feature. So we'll talk about that later. So these are the ways that you can enable it. You can do it through HMC command line, some GUIs on the 850, and in the LPM automation tool. So this is what the panel looks like on the classic HMC GUI on the Create LPAR Wizard. You have this, allow this partition to be remote restartable, simplified, so you check that box. Now this option is only shown on the Create Partition Wizard. If you don't set it now, you'll have to shut down the LPAR and change its value and then reboot the LPAR, or you can do that LPM trick. If you use the Enhanced GUI, this is what the 850 Enhanced GUI looks like. If you see at the very bottom down there, you can see, I know it's hard to read even on my screen, there's a box around a couple check boxes, and one of them is Simplified Remote Restart. And so you can check that box. And then there's also a state, and we'll talk a little bit about state later on. So remote restart, there's a remote restart state, so that when you want to do a remote restart, you can make sure the state's in the right state. That's sort of funny. It has to be in the correct state before a remote restart can happen. And so we'll talk a little bit about that going forward. So you can check it here on the Enhanced GUI. And if you have templates, they have there's some predefined templates that say they're SRR templates. You can also capture a partition that already has SRR on it, and that could be used as a template. And if you have it enabled, the partition is deployed with SRR if the system supports P8. If it's P8, it's got that feature on it. The template deploy would fail if you tried to deploy a SRR template on a non-SRR capable box. And partitions, if you have it disabled, they'll create, if you have a template that has this feature disabled, it's going to deploy it without SRR. And there's actually another ability. You can have a template that says enable if possible. That says we'll set SRR if we're putting it on a SRR capable system, and we won't set SRR if we're putting it on a system that doesn't support SRR. So you'd probably want that enable if possible option if you're using templates, so that template could be used for both a P8 and a P7, and a P8 maybe that doesn't have Enterprise Edition on it.
So Bob?
Yes.
Bob? Yeah, let me just interrupt you a bunch. We've got several questions that I think I just want to...
yes, let me open up the chat. Hold on.
Yeah, I just want to, you know, get some basic things out of the way. There was a little bit of confusion maybe when we talked about migrating Power 7 to Power 8 and stuff. So SRR is only available for Power 8, right?
Correct.
Yeah, so when you talk about, I mean, as you migrate your partitions from Power 7 to Power 8 or even Power 6 or whatever to Power 8, if you're doing LPM to do that, you can turn on SRR as part of that migration though, correct?
Only through the command line. That's correct.
Okay, through the command line. Okay, but in order, the other few questions that we've gotten on as far as using SRR, just to make sure that, I think it kind of covered this, but just to make sure everybody understands that this is an LPM, and you have to be LPM capable to do this.
Yes, you know, and I used to have that in a chart, and it looks like I dropped it some wording, but basically what I will say, if a partition is LPM capable, it can also be set to SRR. If a partition is not LPM capable, you cannot enable SSR. And I used to have specific words on that, and I've swizzled the charts a little bit, but that's a very good point. LPM capable partitions can be SRR capable.
Right, and so you need the Power VM Enterprise Edition in order to do this. Okay.
Yes, that's correct.
So I just wanted to, you know, make sure that we just made those, because we had several questions on those, so I just wanted to make sure that we covered those and made it clear. So.
Well, great. Thanks. Okay, thanks very much, Joe. Like I said, I see the question. I was looking in the chat, but I should be looking in the question. Okay.
Yeah, and we can. There's several other questions there. You know, we can cover them. You know, when you're done here, some of them you're answering as you go along, but those were kind of basic. I wanted everybody to have an understanding of.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much. Yes, you're right. Power Enterprise Edition, and if a partition's LPM capable, it can be made SRR capable. Okay, so this is where we just stopped. So we'll go to the next chart now. And this is sort of what we have some predefined templates now. And if you look at, you can see here now on the enhanced HMC GUI over on the far right, you can see that if you have extra capabilities set for a partition like Simplified Remote Restart, they show up here on the HMC GUI in your templates and stuff. So, like I said, the enhanced HMC GUI has been adding a lot more SRR support to it. You won't see this. You can see that you're SRR capable on the classic GUI. On the general properties, I don't have a screenshot of that, but this you can see here that it's a prominent feature in the enhanced HMC. Okay, so this is, now we've been over some high-level stuff, and I wanted to also give you guys and gals some low-level stuff too, just, you know, going forward and maybe to help you sometimes when something you've seen this, as Bob said, just check a box, but it's not quite just check a box. I got something else going on here. So I'm going to move something out of my screen so I can read the whole thing. Okay. So there is a remote restart status on a partition. You actually have remote restart status even if you don't have SRR set. You know, on the HMC, all this stuff can be seen via command line, and fields that aren't necessarily relevant to a partition still show up with a value in it. So there is are you capable, which is the way you enable it, and then you look at your status. So you can go off and see that you have that you're in the correct state for remote restart. a status like it's not remote restartable. Sometimes that'll be the status, or it's remote restartable, or it's the config data is out of sync or whatever. And so you can go see some of that stuff over here. So if you start to have issues, you might want to go off and do ls sysconfig and go off and look at your LPARS information and see what status is. Now, the other thing that, so I don't think, if you have some problem trying to remote restart or something like that, you would do that type of command. Sometimes, well, isn't the sometimes, that third bullet's sometimes. Now, what happens is I told you we had these blue dots that are stored up on the HMC in a subdirectory called /data. And it's the configuration data for a server and its partitions. And so that blue data file, that's all since I started saying blue dot, that blue data file, that gets updated automatically by the HMC. So when you make a DLPAR change or you shut down a partition and you activate it with a different profile or something like that, all that information gets stored into that data file in the /data subdirectory on the HMC. If you have redundant HMCs, it's stored in both of them. And if there's something wrong with that data file or some reason the data file gets out of sync, what we would do is we would you would want to run a refdev command to refresh that. So this refdev command, which is this third bullet, third sub-bullet on the second thing, is an HMC command. And so I have not had to ever do that. I do remote restart testing somewhat. I mean, you have to bring down a server to test it. So I don't test remote restart every day, but I do test remote restart, every other week or so. So I've not ever seen us get out of sync with data, but we always like, if something happens and we are out of sync, you can do this refdev command to sync stuff up. And sometimes this third bullet here is they actually point this out that, like, if you actually did some configuration changes without going through the HMC interfaces, so the HMC is keeping this data file updated on /data. So when things happen at the HMC level, the HMC then says, hey, this is a config change, I need to update the file. But if you actually go into a VLS and do some stuff underneath the VLS, like maybe you add in some new disk or whatever like that, you're not going through the HMC, and so if you attach storage to the VLS CLI, you would want to run refdev back on the HMC for that client so to get it back in sync. So, if you're using it, that's more because if you're using MPIV, you're just, all we do when you use MPIV is we just know what your virtual WPNs are and what they're mapped to FCS 0, 1, 2, or 3 on the VLS. So adding storage underneath a VFC adapter shouldn't have any issues and stuff like that. But possibly, if you create some new vSCSI stuff, or you had some vSCSI stuff that had never had storage attached to it, and then you might want to refdev there. So that's something to look at on, when you start to attach storage outside of the HMC. And the last thing is you have to activate the partition at least once before the remote restart can be performed. So let's say you created a partition and you never activated it, then you can't remote restart it. So that seems reasonable to me because we don't know what, so don't try to use this as some sort of DR where you've just built some shell partitions out there and then you want to remote restart them. If it crashes, you need to activate them so that we can load this configuration file into the HMC/data subdirectory. Okay. Now, so far, we've been talking about remote restart without an automation tool. And so, okay, Bob, I'm going to adopt a simplified remote restart. Okay, I just had a service crash. I can't find the simplified remote restart GUI. Well, there is no remote restart GUI on the HMC. It's command line only. And this chart shows you all the different remote restart commands that you would need to do. So, later on I'm going to talk about an automation tool, so you don't have to know about all these commands. But if you want to do remote restart yourself and you don't have an automation tool or you'll have to learn these commands to do remote restart. So one thing that you can do is you can do a validate. And so what does this do? If you're familiar with live partition mobility, LPM, and you can only enable this on LPM partition, so people that don't know LPM won't be enabling this until they learn LPM first. You can do a validate. It's just similar to the LPM validate. It's going to make sure that the destination server has a VLS that can see the same storage and the same network that your source server does, and make sure there's enough CPU and memory and some other things that are set right. They're going to make sure that you're completely LPMable. And so remote restart -o validate you can run, but you can only run this command when the partition is powered off. You cannot run remote restart -o validate when you're up and running. So this is going. So this is a problem. I don't know if it's a problem. It's something a little interesting there. So in our tool, when we do a validate, if the partition is shut down and when your customer says, I want to do a validate of partition, we'll run RR-O validate on our tool. If the partition is up and running, we'll run a LPM validate. So LPM validate and remote restart validate are almost exactly the same, except that remote restart LPAR validate checks that your remote restart status is set to the right value, and it will also check both even and odd WWPNs of your MPIV adapters. When you do LPM validate, we're only checking the odd WWPNs if you're running on even on the source. So we're not checking the currently running WWPNs of your virtual fiber channel adapters on your source, but we are checking the odds, and it tends to be most customers tend to have problems with the odd zoning than the even zoning, because they have problems with even zoning, they couldn't even activate the partition. So the two different validates are only different in like 2 steps, is that remote restart checks both even and odd on the destination, and LPM only checks the odd number on the destination. And remote restart also checks that you have the right remote restart status. So if you ever know, if you know Nigel Griffiths, this is the way he does it too. It says if the partition's up and running, just do an LPM validate to make sure that you're remote restartable. That's about the best you can do, unless you can shut down the partitions and actually run the RR start LPAR -o validate. I don't think that's a big issue if you run migration validate or remote restart validate on the partition. I think they're both going to be fine. So then if you had an outage, the second bullet is how you restart it. So you do -o restart, and you have to put all the values in there. And if you wanted to go remote restart and your data somehow got out of sync with the data file, and what the HMC knows what the partition has in it, you can actually do this use current data option. And so I think that the general rule is always just use current data, and if they're out of sync, it'll do the right thing, and if they're in sync, it still does the right thing. So that tends to be use -- use current data, which is that last option on that the restart -o restart. That's what most customers would do. Then if you had something wrong with the remote restart, there's a cancel command, which is our third major bullet here. And if you had a failure, there's a recover here, and cleanup. So this second to last called cleanup. And so in the 850 HMC, there's automatic cleanup that will be occurred, but if you have 840 HMC or lower, you have to clean up that partition on the failed server after the failed server is repaired. So what happened? The server failed, and you did remote restart. Now you have a partition named Bob running on this other server. Well, they fix this failed server, and you power it back on, and that Bob cannot be activated. The HMC prevents you from activating Bob over on this failed server because it knows that you moved it to another server. So you have to clean up that Bob. You have to do a remote restart cleanup, and so that will clean up it'll delete the LPAR, and it actually cleans up all the virtual adapters and stuff like that in the VLS. So it's sort of like what happens when you do an LPM. All the VLS gets cleaned up and all that kind of stuff after an LPM move is complete. So you do a remote restart. You just don't delete it, but then you have to do your own manual cleanup. You actually do a remote restart cleanup. So in the 850 HMC, they have an automatic cleanup option now where you don't have to do this cleanup. So if you're on 840 and below, you'll have to do this cleanup step. If you're at 850 and above, it's a user/customer setting to say perform automatic for me when it comes back up. So these are the command lines you have to use if you don't have some sort of automation tool, and there's the man page at the bottom to look at them. Now let's talk about enhancements that came out in the 850 HMC. So I'm going to spend 2 minutes giving you the backstory, the new keyword for history. The HMC and hypervisor and VLS. Oh, well, let me start back. Live partition mobility requires the HMC to make improvements to it, the hypervisor to make improvements to it, the VLS to make improvements to it, and in some cases, operating systems to make improvements to them to get enhancements throughout it. So there's 3 or 4 software or firmware stacks that have to be changed to make great strides sometimes. And so starting about 4 years ago, those firmware teams and AIX teams and System I teams decided we're going to make live partition mobility much better, much faster, more resilient, et cetera, like Superman, jump and leap tall buildings in a single bound. And they accomplished that. You can now evacuate a 795 server in about 22 minutes, 24 minutes, depending on the size of it. And that's incredible strides from where we were back in 2008 when this first came out. Took a long time to move LPARs. And they spent considerable effort on those firmware teams to get that accomplished. Well, they have gotten a lot of stuff done. They've added some new features in 850 that it makes it even better. But LPM there's not a lot of stuff left on the drawing board to improve. It's really fast now, et cetera, et cetera. So about a year ago, they were feeling they got most of the mission accomplished there, and they started to focus on Simplified Remote Restart. And that's when I was involved too. And at that point, there were some shortfalls that we identified with customers and how they want to use it. And they have now spent a lot of effort on Simplified Remote Restart. They've turned those same LPM resources into Simplified Remote Restart enhancement. So this is a high priority focus item for the development teams. So in the 850 HMC that released in May, they came out with what I think makes this enterprise class. It was pretty good before. I think this makes it why you want to have it now. You want to enable it on your older servers, for when you get to the 850 HMC, you don't have to go through the enablement if you can enable it on the older servers. But this really makes it enterprise level. And so in May of this year, they allowed you to do cross HMC remote restart. So before, you could only remote restart to a server that was managed by the same HMC. Now you can remote restart to a different server managed by a different HMC. And this doesn't mean that they both have to have seen it. I showed you a drawing earlier that I said if you want to do remote restart across data centers, you had to have an HMC in one data center that has the other HMC in the other data center. But in the future, you can do cross HMC remote restart without both HMCs seeing the same source and destination. So that was a big improvement. This second one is the one where I can tell you the story about a server being thrown out and crashes to the floor below. At 840 HMC and below, the server has to be mostly dead, not all the way dead. The FSP has to be alive on 840 and below HMC. At 850, the FSP can be completely gone. That's where the server gets thrown out the window, falls to the ground. You're not talking to that FSP anymore. That server's DOA. So now with the 850, you can have that server completely crashed or that data center completely down, and you can still do remote restart. So I think this second bullet is even the first two bullets combined make this start to make it pretty interesting for cross-site and other types of recovery. The third bullet is live partition mobility override, and this is where I talked about you can LPM back and forth between servers that don't have SRR and do have SRR and enable SRR pseudo-dynamically, and I'm going to show a little bit more on that. And then we have in the 850, we've already talked about some of these templates, so we won't talk any more about the templates in this section, but these new templates on the enhanced GUI came in the 850. And then the auto cleanup came in the 850. And then there's some user specification overrides we'll talk a little bit more about. So they saw where they were a year ago and decided that we need to make SRR even more resilient and we need to add more features to it, and they spent their development time in the last year making that happen. And this is only requires a HMC update. See, all this stuff in here is HMC only. It doesn't require hypervisor changes or FSP changes. It's only HMC or VLS changes. This is all controlled by the HMC. So here is the here's some command lines in here. I've already talked about this a little bit before. We have the new cross HMC. Both HMCs have to be 850. That's first bullet up there. You have to have the normal make auth keys that you have for remote HMC for LPM. We use those same types of auth keys for remote HMC for Simplified Remote Restart, so that's business as usual. And here's the command lines to do it and how you would specify different destination sources, different HMCs, excuse me, on the command line. And so you have this -- IP target HMC, which is the second line of both all three of these commands. And then for those of you that like to write REST APIs, here's a REST API command to do it. And at the bottom here are the REST API parameters, so to speak. So there, for those of you that want to do this, excuse me, I went forward, want to do this yourself, here's the command lines to do that. If you want to do remote restart when the system goes down and you have no connection, you can now do this minus no connection option, which is in bold below. So you do a restart or validate while it's in no connection. And so that's how you do that command. There's a REST API for that. And I've already talked about what the no connection means. It's the servers crashed and burning out in the street. This live partition mobility override, this is a little bit, no, it's not complicated, but that require RR command has two values, a 1 and a 2. And if you don't specify, it's got a sort of a default value too. So what I'm trying to do here, or what we're trying to do in this chart, is that if you have a SRR capable, the first column is you have SRR capable, or you don't have SRR capable already set on your LPAR. The next column is you're trying to move to an SRR capable system or not. The third column is what you set this require RR to. So null means you don't set it at all. You don't even specify it on the command line. Yes is you set it to 1, and 2 is you set it to if possible. So and so here on this first row, the way you would read it, it says I have an SRR capable system on my source, so I'm on a P8. I want to move to the second column is I want to move to a P8 that has SRR on it. If I don't set this, so it's a null, or if I set it to 1, which is yes, or I set it to if possible, I can both LPM and do SRR. So that makes sense there. But let's look at one where it doesn't quite make sense. Let's go down to the third row. Let's say that you are on a P8 SRR capable, and you want to move it to maybe a P8 that's not SRR capable. Well, and you went to an 810 maybe, or you went back to a P7, the second column, and you set to if possible. So you'll be able to LPM it if you set this to if possible, because it's going to it says set SRR if possible, but if it's not possible, go ahead and do the LPM and just don't set it. But that last column says, can I actually do SRR on the capable? Well, you can't do SRR because that second column says you're moving to a non-SRR capable system. So setting this override allows you to still do an LPM to another. You can still do LPMs, both SRR and non-SRR in this third row, but you can't do SRR because your source system, your target system, is not SRR capable. So this chart is once you understand these parameters, this chart is sort of clear, and maybe I could do a better job explaining it, but you have multiple abilities to move things between P7 and P8 and enable SRR and not enable SSR, and have LPM still work with it. And here's the values of require as 1 and 2, and here's the REST API. So here's that parameter, and 1 means yes, 2 means if possible. So auto cleanup was also introduced in HMC 850. Once again, these are all HMC enhancements. Nothing was needed in the firmware or the hypervisor. And you can enable auto cleanup. And so basically, right now, if you're in 840 HMC, after you do an SRR and the server comes back up, you, the user, has to do the cleanup, doing the remote restart -O cleanup command. In 850, you can set it to be auto cleaned up, and when that partition comes, when that server comes back up, the HMC will say, "Oh, you had auto cleanup set up, and we actually have done SRR of these 3 partitions or these 10 partitions or all the partitions. So we'll do a remote restart -O cleanup on all those partitions that need to be cleaned up." And or else, like I said, you can do it. You can either do it yourself or with the command line, or you can do it with just have it automatically clean up. And then PowerVC can. So we've talked so far that the HMC GUI. There is no HMC GUI remote restart. PowerVC does have understands simplified remote restart also as of this spring, and so PowerVC can be used to do some remote restart. I am not a PowerVC expert. I tend to say it's supported here, and I believe it, and I'm fine with that. But I can't tell you where to go find these panels on the PowerVC. So if you're using PowerVC, you can also use this simplified remote restart, and you can enable or disable auto cleanup also. This last thing we haven't talked about in any of the charts before. Let me backtrack a little bit. When you do live partition mobility, there are a lot of options on the LPM command on the HMC to do all sorts of exotic things. And there must be 30 or 40 options on that command line. The remote restart command line has 10 options maybe. So it doesn't have 40, it's got 10. And when we first came out on the remote restart, we had like 5. So now with this 850, we've gone from 5 to 10, so to speak. It's some order, it's definitely increased quite a bit. So what we have found when I talk to customers about live partition mobility is that when they want to move things, some customers want to have complete control of where this partition ends up on the destination server. And the HMC command line for remote for LPM has all those options on them. The remote restart command did not have those options on them. It only had a handful. And so what the HMC team did is they said, what are some of the most important things customers are asking about for LPM that we need to take from the LPM command and add to the remote restart command? And the first 2 things they've brought over is shared processor pools, the ability to specify your shared processor pool when you do a simplified remote restart. And here's the command line here. So right now, when you do a simplified remote restart on 840 or below, if you're in shared processor pool named Joe Armstrong, when we simplified remote restarted you, we put you in the default pool, pool 0. Well, some customers say, no, I want to go into the Joe Armstrong pool on the destination, or maybe they've renamed Joe Armstrong to Joe A, and so I want to go from Joe Armstrong on source to Joe A on the destination. So now you can specify your shared processor pool, and here's the command line down here below on how to do it. The other thing that they added to the remote restart command line was the ability to do your virtual fiber channel mappings. I do talk to a lot of customers, and the virtual fiber channel mappings tend to be the customers that want to use the HMC command line for migration, LPM, want to have this. They're very adamant that they need this feature, and so for enterprise level customers, that's why I thought this 850 HMC release makes it truly enterprise with cross HMC and some of this other stuff here. Now I have my large enterprise customers that have the ability to do specify the VFC mappings and which FCS ports you use on your destination servers and which VLSs you use on the destination servers. Now you have the ability to do that through Simplified Remote Restart. This tends to be a more important thing. This is the control that the most customers, when a customer is asking for one thing, this tends to be the one thing they want. So the folks that are really dogmatic about their FCS mappings and how they want to balance their workload need this feature. So they've added this feature to Simplified Remote Restart, and I'm not going to get to the command line here, but you can see it there. Okay. And once again, I said, you know, a year ago they're going to focus a lot on improving SRR. You used to be able to do 4 remote restart commands at a time up until the 840 HMC release. Now you can do 32. So they've increased your concurrency. So if you wanted to move 32 at once, you could issue 32 remote restart commands in a row, and they'll all get queued up and be done. Okay, so I'm going to take a pause here, Joe, because now we're going to talk about the LPM automation tool and how, if you don't want to do a bunch of command line, how you can make your life easier using Simplified Remote Restart. Do we have any questions we need to attack before we move on to this next section?
Oh yeah, there are some questions here, Bob. So let's take a few of them at least, okay?
Yes, that's good.
So let me ask you a few that have kind of come up. So remote restart can be used with any partition, IBM I, AIX, or Linux, right?
Yes, that's correct. Any partition.
Okay, and let's see. Somebody had asked kind of early on, and I didn't want to interrupt you, but there was some talking about existing LPARs that are set up for remote restart to convert them to SRR. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, let me talk a little bit about this. I hadn't really thought about that too much, but right now, for those of you on the line that don't know about the old one, you had that blue dot that was on the HMC that I call a data file. That data file was represented by a reserved storage device, which was basically a LUN that you had to configure for every single LPAR in a VLS. So if you had 10 LPARs that you wanted to have remote restartable in the old way, you had to have 10 LUNs assigned to the VLS. And so that's why it was so hard to implement this, because some customers I have 150 LPARs, I want to be SRR, I got to create 150 LUNs, map them to all my VLSs. So we have a customer here that has used the old one, and he or she has specified some LUNs there. So I think the deal here is you would just you can I think, well, this is a good question. I'll have to get back to you. I think you can LPM over and set SRR. I think you can have both SRR set and the old remote restart set, and then you can go over there and start getting rid of all those old LUNs, you know, after you move it and have SRR set and get rid of that. But I'll have to double check. I think you can have both of those set and, you know, move it from P7 to P8. When you're moving from P7 to P8, have that require RR set, and then now you have Simplified Remote Restart enabled, and then you can remove those LUNs and you can unset that previous remote restart. So there's no easy way to convert that I know of, but I'll actually ask that question to development and see what they say.
Okay.
I'll have to get back on that, Joe.
All right. Another, maybe this would be a little bit quicker question, is enterprise pools. Is there any tie-in to remote restart into enterprise pools so that, like, if you wanted to move resources as well, you know, mobile resources, you know, just to kind of give a quick thing, you know,
yeah,
people, you move the mobile resources. If it's in the same pool, it can move the CPU resources and memory over to another system.
So there is nothing built into the HMC to do that. The automation tool I'm about ready to talk about does automatically move resources for you if you need to. It won't move them if you don't need to. And PowerVC definitely has the capability to move resources at an LPM basis. I'm not sure if they do it at the remote restart basis, but no, there's nothing built into the HMC. You'll either have to get it through the LPM automation tool I'm going to talk about next, or through PowerVC.
Okay. There are a couple of questions on when the LPAR is moved, as far as the application and being restarted and steps that you have to take to get the application up and running again. Is any of that automated, or once that the LPAR
No,
is
so this is where, no, it's not. So this is where Simplified Remote Restart is not a Power HA replacement, because Power HA can restart those apps and all that kind of stuff. Basically, what you're doing is you're moving this partition to another server, you're reactivating it, then your app teams are going to have to get on there and get things back up and running. So this is a big differentiator, of why this isn't a Power HA replacement, because all that stuff would be done automatically for you. No, you'll have to restart all your jobs from scratch. Everything's crashed. It's like someone pulled the plug, and now we've just restarted this partition on another server. You got to restart everything that doesn't automatically restart.
Yep. Okay. When you have a system with a bunch of LPARs on it that are all, SRR and A, and it crashes, you can split those partitions for where they go. They don't all have to go to the same frame somewhere else, right? You can go to spread them out if you have like numerous small frames that you need to fit these all onto.
So that's a great lead into our next topic, is that you can do that as a user. If you don't have the tool, you'll have to figure out where they can fit and all that kind of stuff, and where to go, how to get from here to there, and where they fit. This tool we're going to talk about next, which is both LPM and SRR, it allows you to take hundreds of LPARs, and we'll fit them across as many destination frames as you want us to fit them across, and we'll find the best fit for you, and you can adjust the fit after we come up with it. So, there's no restriction on SRR to go to any particular frame. Partitions will be split all over your IT environment. Just how long will it take for you to do that, whether you're using an automation tool that can do it in a matter of seconds.
Okay. I think you mentioned this, Bob, but the question is, can SRR be tested without powering off the frame? But I think you said that you have to power off the frame. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. You can only do that validate. The only thing you can do is a validate, and the validate is it's the best you can get. Right, and this has always been a how do you test this, and you just have to do that validate, and if that validate works, I mean, you're 99% of the way there. So yeah. I would think if your validate's good, you're probably okay.
Okay.
If you've ever done, now real quick, if you've ever LPM'd an LPAR from one server to another server, and that's worked, that to me is a validation also. If you've LPM'd something from one to another, or one to one of your other different endpoints, that's already showing you that your remote restart should be working okay.
Okay. And you might hit this with the LPM automation tool, but the question is, will the SRR remain the fiber channel mappings?
No,
will it maintain the fiber channel mapping?
Right. No, this is for those that know LPM and the fiber channel mapping things. If you have one VLS pair, it's not. You just lose your FCS mappings, but not your VLS mappings. But if you have more than one VLS pair, sometimes things don't end up where you want them to be. And so that's why they gave you that previous override we just talked about the VFC mappings if you want your own command line. And the tool I'm going to describe can maintain your mappings on the destination. So nothing exists other than my tool for that.
Okay.
Unless you write your own scripts and do the command lines on the previous page. Yeah.
Okay. Practical distances for limitations for using this?
So we're built on the LPM foundation, so to speak, okay?
Right.
And so if you have LPM across a data center, 100 kilometers apart or 100 miles apart, then SRR is going to work. SRR doesn't actually have to transfer any data between the two destination servers. Not LPM, you're transferring the memory contents of your partition across those different sites. So if you had a site 1,000 miles away on a modem, LPM's not capable, right? It'd take too long.
Right.
But SRR doesn't do any data transfer. So if you have LPM capable across data centers, there's SRR will work there too. So there's nothing. SRR doesn't add anything to what you need. If you're already LPMable across data centers, SRR is much easier. It's much quicker and doesn't have any additional requirements.
Okay. So I know you mentioned that SRR will work with PowerVC, and there were actually some questions on that, so I'm glad you mentioned that. But the other question is, if you're using PowerVC with NovaLink so that you're not using an
Mm-hmm.
HMC, is an HMC required? Can you use SRR with PowerVC and NovaLink so that you not have an HMC in there?
Good question. I'll have to get back to you because I'm sure you can, but right now I know that we store the data on the HMC in the /data subdirectory. I just want to know where, I want to ask the NovaLink people where they store that data.
Okay.
So then maybe the NovaLink reads it from the HMC, and you still have to have an HMC somewhere in there, and the NovaLink keeps the HMC updated. I don't know. I'll have to ask I'll have to ask the development team. That's a great question.
Yeah, yeah. All right, maybe this one's easier, and I'm going to make this one the last one for you, and so that you can move on. Is you can use SRR with shared storage pools.
Yeah, shared storage pools. Yeah, that's an LPM capable partition.
Yep.
SRR is fine with that. That's like a vSCSI adapter. Yeah, no problem. SRR works with both vSCSI adapters. Anything that's LPMable, SRR works with it.
Okay, so great, Bob. I'll let you get on to the rest of your thing here because we only have about, I don't know, a little over 15 minutes left, and I want to be able to get through this.
Okay, let me. What I'll do is I'll go through 10 minutes of charts, and we'll leave 5 minutes for more questions. So I apologize. We're going to skip some charts here, but I'm going to try to hit the highlights of the charts for you. Okay, so let's talk about this PowerVM, LPM, and SRR automation tool. This is a tool that I've talked to you people before about that comes from Lab Services. There's 3 of us that developed it. It's actually the development teams, and you ask for features. When you go to IBM Austin, you say, I want this feature. They tell you, go get Bob Foster's, and they use my name, LPM automation tool, because I used to work with them all the time. They know me real well. Because we're not going to be able to add all the features in that Bob can add into his tool. So, and we're compatible with PowerVC installations. Eddie Schwartzman, who's the PowerVC architect, and I have been talking for a year and a half about our tools and make sure they always are compatible. So PowerVC installations can use this tool also. We're in lock sync. So this is an important tool that fills what I call a product gap between what we can ship quickly and what I can do with a small team, an agile team. This tool was released a year and a half ago, 160 customers worldwide, and we have its very high customer satisfaction with the tool. It's unbelievable how well this tool is liked and used all the time by our customers. It's the fastest growing tool in Lab Services, and it's on every continent and subcontinent, other than Antarctica. And we're working on a new version of the tool that we're going to hopefully release in about 2 or 3 weeks that incorporates all the new 850 HMC features of Simplified Remote Restart and some other things with live partition mobility. And so if you want to use Simplified Remote Restart, you've heard that you're going to have to do your own HMC command line, or if you have PowerVC, you can do it through there, or you'll use this tool here. And so I expect this SRR feature, as more customers adopt it, this tool will be more interesting to them. So high level, you've got something that's proven worldwide with our largest customers in the world, and let's talk about this tool a little bit. And so about this before, basically you can evacuate a frame via LPM or SRR. You can take all the L parts off you want, or a subset of those L parts you want off, and you can spread them across multiple destination servers, and this tool will figure all that stuff out, figure out where to place it, and then if you don't like where it's placed, you can adjust where the placement is. We give you a workable plan. You can change the workable plan to whatever you want to. This is true for both LPM and SRR. You can build plans in advance, which are Excel spreadsheets. So I call them plans officially, but they're just Excel spreadsheets. You can build those in advance and then use those when something happens. So, or if you want to do some scheduled maintenance for LPM, use those for scheduled maintenance. And if you have an outage, you can use these plans you've built in the past for an SRR event. And so, and one thing that is new to the new version is this very last bullet on this first page, on this page here. And this is probably the most important bullet, that I want you to understand. Because right now, when you SRR, you end up on another server somewhere, and you may not have the same virtual slot numbers because of collisions with the VLS, what slot numbers are being used. You may not have the same FCS mappings because you didn't specify the FCS mappings. You may not have the same shared processor pool because it didn't exist over there, but you had to put in the default. You could have multiple things change on either an LPM operation or an SRR operation. Well, you know, okay, no problem, Bob. When I have to use SRR, it's all hands on deck. We got to get these things up and running. I will fix things later. Thank you very much. Well, we fixed this server that's been down on SRR. Now you want to put everything back, and you want to put it back the way you took it off. You have no way to do that except with this tool here and this bottom line here. This tool, when we SRR something away in this tool, we save where all its original config stuff. And when the SRR is over, you perform an LPM to return it because the partition's up and running now on this new server, and you want to keep it up and running and put it back on the original repaired server, and you want to go back the way it came off, or you want to go back to where it was. You want all the same slot numbers, HBA mappings, VLS mappings, VSCSI mappings, shared processor pool, all that stuff. This tool will put you back exactly the way you came off. You'd have to write so much code, you wouldn't believe how much code you'd have to write to do this. This tool does this. We've been doing this with LPM since 2014. SRR is just, oh yeah, we'll just put that in the database too. We don't, you know, we're testing it, but there was no new code to be written for that because we've already been doing LPMs and setting all the parameters for LPMs when we move things back. So now you have an SRR, you got to get all your partitions off or some of them off. You fix that server. You want to bring those subset back or all of them back, and you can bring them all back in like 3 clicks, and you get everything moved back in the same slot numbers, et cetera, et cetera. So that's one thing I want you to take about that. SRR will put it back the way it came off, and it's just a couple clicks. Okay. So there is a new version of the tool. I'm going to start. We've decided to name the version of the tool to the HMC level, that the highest HMC level that we will support, or well, that we understand the capabilities of it. So the 850 HMC, which is really version 8 with these 8.5, you know, HMC number, has all these new features, and we've talked about in the last hour. This new version of the tool, we're going to rename it version 8.5. It's currently version 4, so we're going to skip 4 versions. But now you're going to know, hey, this 8.5 version of the LPM automation tool, LPM Simplified Remote Automation tool, can support and use the new features of the HMC 850. So this is a big thing here. And for example, this very second one here is, well, if you want to specify VFC mapping, the shared mappings when you're doing SRR, the tool will support that. And so we've been doing this type of stuff for LPM. Doing this for SRR is just a subset of what we've already done for LPM. So that's a new feature. And I have some other things in here. I'm not going to go over them because we don't have much time, but some people that already have the LPM automation tool will be interested in seeing some of this stuff. Probably the biggest thing in here is the subdividing partitions into different groups, so the 4th sub-bullet for concurrent LPM. So some customers who want me to group things and be able to group stuff, we can now group stuff. And but there's more we will talk about later. Okay. This is what the tool looks like. This tool, it runs in your browser. It installs on either AIX or Linux or Windows or MacBooks. So you can, it's basically a bunch of Java stuff, and we've got the libraries, and we package everything together, and you just unzip a file, and you're up and running in a matter of minutes. The installation, 160 customers, every installation's been the same. Unzip it. 2 minutes later, the tool is up and running, and you can start LPMing stuff away or doing other things. So this is 3 people's worth of effort to bring you this type of tool, and so the GUI may not be the best GUI in the world, and I admit that, but it's a GUI. And when you want to LPM stuff away, or when you want to simplify remote restart away, there's at the bottom, there's the set of icons, and I've circled this icon that looks like a gear, and that's our remote restart icon. And you click on that, and on your left it says, I have a system that I want to, on the left hand you got all the HMCs you can attach to. You can attach to multiple HMCs. I got some customers that have 1,000 LPARs being that they LPM with this tool, so it's pretty scalable. And you attach to multiple HMCs, and then you have all your servers underneath an HMC. And here I'm saying I have a server that's found a no connection, and I want to remote restart all the partitions over to another one. So on the left, I have a server that I need to get the partitions off, and here I've clicked just 2 or 3 LPARs here, but one click would select all of them. And then on the right, I say, where do I want these to try to end up on? So first we have to do a validate to see where they can end up on. So this is where you can say, I want to choose one server to move all these partitions to, or I want you to try to spread all these partitions across multiple destinations. So the right-hand side, you start choosing your multiple destinations. And if you had multiple HMCs, you could choose different servers under different HMCs, and this tool works just fine. I mean, remote HMC works with this tool, and so you can have someone go to the same HMC on servers there and have someone go to remote HMC on other servers. And you do that, and then this tool goes off, and it'll go off and it'll figure out, hey, I can move these, I can remote restart these partitions to these different destination servers. And this is what they call the placement panel. And in here on the left, you can choose which server. Maybe you had multiple destinations, and we're trying to put an HA cluster on the server where the other HA is on. You can adjust which server it goes to. I have a default placement algorithm on the upper right, on the middle right-hand corner. There's a placement policy box. There's multiple ways you can choose different placement policies, and then you can still edit the plan as you wish. On this bottom right, on the far right, near the bottom, there's something called export. You can export this plan to a spreadsheet and edit it in the spreadsheet, and then import it back in and perform that plan. So some customers just go from this screen directly to SRR, and some customers will export it and do some more additional changes like VFC mappings or whatever, and do that from there. So, and then you can go off and you can remote restart stuff. Here's a chart that says you can change the order of how we move things around. By default, I move the largest CPU first, and then the second largest CPU second, but you can change that around. And here's if you want to create plans, which are spreadsheets, you can export that. And I have in here, I don't actually have a screenshot of the new 850 Excel spreadsheet, but in this blue text down here, you'll be able to specify your VFC mapping and shared processor pool settings. We already had that on the LPM side of this tool. So people that already know how to do this on the LPM side of things, it's the same way on the SRR. You know, we're trying to reuse the same objects, et cetera, et cetera. And when it's completed, this is what happens after you move things. And I'm talking about cleanup here. I have a chart here. When you want to clean stuff up, you click on the RR cleanup button underneath the RR icon of that settings down there, and it'll list you all the different LPARs you have up there. If you have automatic cleanup, you don't have to do this step at all. And once again, this is the important feature I said that on the new version of this tool, we're going to put everything back to where it came from. And so that's that last bullet again. Everything is moved back to its original settings. So I discussed that a few minutes ago, and here it is in text. And let me show you one other chart here, and then we'll go to questions, Joe. We're skipping, obviously we're skipping some panels here. I apologize for that. Here's the Power Enterprise Pools, we support that. I have some videos, and I don't get paid by the video view, so don't worry about that. But I have more explanation in these videos if you're more interested at learning more about this. I have these case-sensitive URLs. They are case-sensitive, so when it says capital SRR, type that in to go see that. But these are all out on YouTube, and you can go off and learn more about the tools, and I have 7 or 8 videos out there. I don't think this is a complete list, but okay. So with that, Joe, let's go back to questions.
Okay. Just trying to bop up here, answer some, and keep up with you at the same time. There's a question in here about somebody that, so it's I don't know if you're looking at the panel, Bob, it's the second one from the top, but it says he tried to SRR. The problem is that you have to shut down the partition to enable SRR, and then he wanted to LPM that partition from power 8 to power 7 for some reason, and he couldn't because SRR was enabled, so he had to shut down the partition, disable it in order to do the LPM. And,
that's
and
right.
the question is, will that be fixed sometime?
Yeah, that's in the 850. That's already there. Yeah, 850 HMC allows you to go back and forth now, and that's where you set that require RR value to 2. Set it to 2. Require RR space 2.
Okay, great.
I don't know if it's. I don't think the GUI has an override on the GUI of the HMC for that. I think you have to do that manually. I'd have to. I don't have an 850. I can look at it real quick. But.
Okay.
Yep, that's fixed.
I want to get here to. So, so the LPM tool. There was some questions on your LPM tool here. So let's see. Can the existing LPM tool customers upgrade to the LPM SRR automation tool?
Yes. So when you got the tool delivered to you, you're registered to an IBM support site called Resource Link. You log into that with your normal IBM support ID, and you have access to all versions of the tool, and you can upgrade it anytime you want. And this new 850 hopefully will be out there in a couple of weeks, and you'll be able to pull that down also. So 850 is not on the website yet, but you should already be registered. If you're not registered, you don't remember, send me an email, which is my email address is the top chart of this, and I'll figure out, I'll give you the links back to that tool if you've lost the link to the tool.
Okay, and so all Bob's charts are on the wiki, everybody. So if you need, I can put the wiki link out here, but the wiki link is in any emails that I send out to you, and everything always has the wiki link in it. But Bob's presentation is on the wiki. You can download it.
Yeah, you have access to updates. Go ahead.
Okay, so let's see. So I was answering questions, Bob. So I'm not sure if you covered this, but there's some questions on how people get the tool, the cost of the tool, and that kind of thing.
Okay, great. We have not covered that. This is the lab services engagement. On the next, this talks about the tool here, but on the next, I thought I had, so contact me first off. If you know any of these people on this chart here, Stephen Brandenburg, Linda Hoban, or Mark Even, contact them. But if you don't know any of those people, contact me, and we'll figure out, you'll figure out your company name and what's available. Basically, lab services is delivered through business. This tool is delivered through business partners or IBM itself, and that'd be my IBM team that would help deliver it. We are worldwide. I haven't done 160 engagements in the last year and a half. I have 60 people worldwide that can do engagements, and we'll figure out what works best for you as a customer. So just contact us, and we'll tell you what your options are. But every customer is different. That's why I can't just give you one answer.
Okay, let's do 2 more kind of quick ones here. One is, do the servers have to be at firmware 850? This person says my 880s are running at firmware 840. Does he need to upgrade them or just 850?
Right, good question. Your firmware 840, there's no firmware 850 yet, so all the features I had talked about today, the advanced features, are with Agency 850 only. You leave your server at 840 and you're good. If you have a server at firmware 820, there may be a couple of things that you can't do, but no, your firmware can be anywhere from 820 to 840 and use this tool.
Okay. So I'm going to leave you with this last question, Bob. I think it's a good question to end on. So the question is that this person says, I'll be asked by my management about the risks for enabling this feature. So if you enable SRR on on all their LPARs that are capable, on Power 8 LPARs, is there any reason not to? Does it consume resources? Will it affect performance? Here's your chance. Give the big spiel.
Let's talk about that. So I talked earlier that we save configuration data when you do a DL, activate a partition. So we have a data file on the HMC that we keep updated, and we update it when you activate or do a DL par. So and so that doesn't happen very often, but we'll spend a few cycles updating that file. So no, it's not going to take any additional resources to keep this file updated. And the HMC now has 2 terabytes of data on it, and these files are about 1 to 2K in size. So they're not very big files on a 2 terabyte. You basically have 1 million LPARs worth of data on this HMC, and still be in great shape. So no, there's no additional overhead on the HMC. There is a slight additional overhead to update the file, but that's minuscule when you're doing an activation. It takes minutes to activate sometimes, so that's no big deal. So no, there is no drawback to setting this.
So the real risk is if you don't set it and someday something happens and you get asked why this wasn't enabled, right?
Right. No, that's not really. I'd be embarrassed if someone caught me with my hand in the cookie jar and I hadn't enabled this.
Okay. So with that, we are out of time. So we'll go ahead and close up. A couple of things. First of all, Bob, thanks so much for doing this. It was a great presentation and a great tool or a feature to get enabled and learn about if you have Power 8 systems that you can do this with. So thank you so much, Bob.
You're welcome. Thanks, everyone, for attending.
Yep. And so next month, I haven't sent out the invites yet, but next month is Tricks of the Power Masters, so by Gareth Coates. So we kind of went through this once. I think Gareth has learned some new tricks, so look for invites for September. With that, everyone, nice seeing you again virtually, and you have a great month. Bye.
So, Joe, are we still live?